Here.
Misty Lowe.
Here.
Erica Helm.
Here.
Gary McMahon.
Yes.
You guys are coming, so.
Yes.
The first order of action is financial business. We have those right here. We'll go through them in a few minutes. We'll move to approval of school board minutes, public and non-public. The chair would entertain changes in the motion.
All right, make a motion to accept the school board minutes from 4/25/18, both public and non-public.
Second.
And I think there's just a couple of things people might have some. One, Amelia, on line 51, and it would probably continue to 52, it should say, Mr. Patrick said it was available through a vote, and it's a vote by the board to use money for the capital reserve.
That's correct. We'll be a board vote, yes.
And, let me just see. I think that's it that I'm seeing. I don't know if anybody else saw anything.
Page, I'm sorry, line 56. Preschool to Stratford. There's the transition, so from preschool to Stratford. And then, I can't read my notes. While the other districts cover Co-Brown, isn't it eighth grade to Co-Brown, not other districts? I think is what we were saying, it was transitions season as well, preschool to Stratford, while the 8th grade to Co-Brown.
Yeah.
Line 59, I think it was Stratford gained 2 preschoolers as well as 2, and I think they were identified Co-Brown students or not?
I believe that's why Mr. Rooney was giving us that information. I have that down too. 'Cause I didn't want to.
It's 2 identified students.
Yeah.
Oh, so the 2 identified students were for CBA and not
Correct.
Well,
For both.
For both.
I think we
So
got
there's a total of
2
4.
identified preschoolers and 2 identified high schoolers, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then line 113, they are excited for, not fort, program.
Paper, I'm sorry, 114.
114, very last word on that line, I believe should be for and not fort.
Oh.
And line 198, Ms. Helm asked if the student's name needed to be put on, or it just says Ms. Helm asked if the name needed to be put.
It would
I
be
think
the
it was an
athlete's.
editing.
It would be the athlete's name, yeah. Need instead of needed, need. If this.
Needs to be.
If the athlete's name needed to be put on the document.
That's it, thank you.
Anyone else with any modifications to the minutes? No? Hearing none, then we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes with the changes?
Aye.
Say aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we're going to move on to report administration.
Thank you.
We do have a non-public that was moved up, but we're not using that.
No, we're gonna need one at the end.
Have you? Okay. I'm sorry. But, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Before I get into my report, I made a mistake on the hire form for Mrs. Marston, she's been working with us as a substitute paraprofessional. On the hire form, it indicated 6.5 hours. She works 7 hours, as does every other paraprofessional. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention before we draw out the contract for the remainder of the year that she works for us full-time, which is per the contract. She's here from 8 to 3:30 each day with a 30-minute lunch non-paid, which would be 7 hours that she's paid hourly. So I apologize for that mistake. We have a MAP PLC group that's just started meeting. We have focused a lot, quite a bit in my first a couple of years here on literacy and writing instruction and readers workshop and other things around that, which has been wonderful. And we wanted to create more focus on math instruction. And so we've looked at math curriculum with the curriculum alignment process that we've been involved in this year with Dr. Driscoll. We are excited about the Math PLC group that really wants to look at both curriculum and instruction in terms of what we're doing. A number of years ago, prior to my coming, the school adopted the Math and Focus textbook series, and which I think has a lot of benefit, but we kind of need to come back around to our practice when it comes to math instruction in general. So it's really, at this point, it's really not a discussion about textbooks, because I think there's a lot of different resources or textbooks we could potentially use for delivering math content. And so long as they're aligned to standards, I don't know necessarily, personally, philosophically, I don't know that that one is better than the other beyond the preference of a teacher. So the focus really isn't on textbooks, it's on curriculum and it's on instructional practice when it comes to assessment. So we had our first meeting at 7:30 in the morning last Thursday. We're going to be meeting again tomorrow at the same time. Mrs. Welch, Mr. Gom, Mr. Nato, Mrs. Nevins, Mrs. Garland, Mrs. Roy are all part of that meeting with me, and they answered the call to be a part of this discussion. So, in our first meeting, these are the questions that we sort of formulated as a group that we want to look at. So I'll just give you a snapshot. How can we develop stronger common language in instructional practices across the grade levels in math? Huge piece. That's the same conversation essentially in the work that we've been doing around literacy as well. How can we better create active, engaged math learners who can flexibly use a variety of strategies and problem-solving methods? That's an important skill for any student, regardless of content area, but in math it can be particularly important. And as I was talking with an experienced high school math teacher today, you know, math phobia in a sense is a real thing. So sometimes math can be the hardest place, sometimes, content area for kids to really do the transfer of knowledge piece. We don't want them to simply rotely learn a rigid method or a formula, although that's important at some level in their initial instruction in math. We want them also to be able to receive a math problem that doesn't look exactly like the one they just had, you know, they practiced 10 times in the homework, and understand conceptually how to apply problem solving to that piece. And so part of our discussion is around just the character value of persistence. It really has nothing to do with math per se, it's about how do we build persistence in students. And then part of the conversation is specifically when it comes to math, which can be a real struggle for some students. How do we achieve this piece of being able to flexibly use different strategies to solve problems? So that's a tough nut to crack. We're going to be working on that for a while, but it's a good starter for us to look at. How can we better identify cross-cutting focus standards in math that are essential for all students to know and understand across the grade levels? So what are those? And that's really what we've been doing through the curriculum alignment work, is we've been tracking focus standards at each grade level for the content areas, is with each instructional unit really finding those 2 to 3 focus standards that are key to that next section or unit of instruction. So we're already kind of doing this work. We really want to incorporate it into the PLC, because teachers are finding that what the receiving teacher might expect the student to be able to know and do isn't always the same as what the sending teacher has. We want to make sure that there's a lot of continuity vertically across the grade levels. And then how can we better serve the math learning needs of students both below and above grade level? Obviously, for those kids that are either needing intervention or advancement, that's one of the toughest pieces sometimes to get to within the core curriculum is how can we serve all students' needs. So we want to tackle that question as well. So those are basically our 4 essential questions that we came up with in our first session. I gave you an article on what good math instruction looks like, maybe even great math instruction looks like. We'd like to get to great. That will be our next piece for tomorrow that we'll be talking about. Everyone will be reading that article and kind of be doing a PLC on 3 questions as it relates to that article. One is, take 1 or 2 things from that article that you'd say, I absolutely agree with that. That's really important. Find 1 or 2 things in the article that maybe you question. If you maybe disagree or question, you wonder, I don't know. In my experience, that's not always the case. And then finally, we're going to talk about one or two items from the article that you found insightful or sort of as new information. I didn't think about instruction or math instruction in that way, and see where that takes us. Ultimately, we have 5 sessions lined up for the month of May for the PLC, but I think the hope is that we can branch the conversation out to the rest of our faculty as well, so that the work that we do here can have an impact around the same 4 questions for the rest of the faculty. So we're excited about that.
Scott, could you just back up a second?
Yeah.
When you mentioned about Math and Focus that we're using right now, is everyone actually using the series?
I would say that for the most part, the answer is yes. Then there are teachers who are definitely supplementing. It depends on the degree, how heavily they're supplementing with Saxon Math and some other resources. But I think, again, ultimately, I think we want to utilize the resources we have, and quite honestly, my main goal is that we have continuity in instructional practice, that we're using best practices, and that we're delivering standards-based instruction.
So I guess where I'm going with this, if some people don't use the series that we have, and I know supplementing is important, sometimes there isn't the continuity and there's gaps, because there's that whole scope and sequence when you're following a textbook. And sometimes when you're not using that and you're pulling from other things but you don't really follow the sequence, then gaps open up. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. I think that the thing that's going to drive for us the scope and sequence is the curriculum alignment work we're doing now, because it's really based on standards, and I really want us to be standards based. And that scope and sequence fleshes out in the process of some of the work that we've been doing in that area. Some of what you're talking about to me has to do with I think an acceptable level of professional autonomy to make some decisions around content at the grade level, either at the grade level or across grade levels, around what the textbook indicates needs to be taught. We really want to make sure that what's driving our instruction are the key standards that we know every student needs to know, and not the other way around that the textbook does. Having said that, Math and Focus does incorporate some key instructional concepts and key language instructionally. Kids need to be well versed in that, because that's what they're experiencing as they come up through the grade levels. We want kids to understand or have an understanding of those pieces. If we want to, one thing that we've talked about is instructionally we want to spiral a little bit more heavily than Math and Focus does. We want to come back to topics or reintegrate them at different times, that's great. There's no problem with that. There's certainly a place for that in the discussion. But when it comes to our instructional approach with math, we want to be linked in with Math and Focus because it does create continuity, and not certainly be a part of our conversation. It has been. There's a couple folks who really are focused on that question. I think we've spoken to it in terms of expectation, but I also don't want to sort of lose the trees and lose the forest in the process of the bigger goal.
And just from some history, we were using Saxon Math.
Yes.
And we moved to Math and Focus. Saxon does have a spiral, and some people felt there wasn't mastery because people felt they'd come back to it. And also it's very language rich, so if you were not a good student who were strong in language, it was more difficult for you. So that's
Good. Yeah.
sort of all that would happen, changing part of the pieces.
Yes. Yeah. And I think ultimately we need to get, part of the conversation is going to lead to looking at Math and Focus and our fidelity with it. And I think it is a question that we've discussed even in this initial meeting. And so that's a decision we just need to make instruction. That's our primary text, and we need to reflect that in what we're doing in the classroom. So.
Yeah, what I'd like to see is how you're going to handle the low level achievement in relationship to the competencies that you will put in place. I mean, do you know that someone's a low level achiever in that they don't make the competencies? Do you move on, or does the student stay until they get proficient in that mastery of that competency? Otherwise, gonna keep moving on anyway, just like the curriculum does now. They won't make the competencies, they'll just never make it. And what is the percent that it's based on making the competency? Is it 70 good, is it 80 good? I mean, where's the cutoff on that part of the curriculum? That'd be interesting to see.
Well, that's
What
definitely
the
a key
group comes
question.
up with. Yeah,
Yeah.
because as you move into competency, those are questions that haven't been answered yet.
Yeah, and I've seen different approaches. I'm not well versed in them. Competency recovery kinds of
Right.
approaches where they have a structure and they have some forms that help to track that process for students. Ultimately, I think if we differentiate instruction well enough and we create stronger tier 2 intervention, we're going to give ourselves a better chance at more proactively getting kids to competency as we move into that. But that's a big structure question too. Yeah, I think it was good thoughts. 8th grade team is down in Washington, D.C. Yesterday they went and toured the White House. Legit. So they were psyched about that, which is pretty cool. They went, what's that? I don't know. I haven't heard. I don't know if they got a shout out from the president or the vice president or who went or what, but I know it was pretty exciting. We haven't had a chance always to do that because there's quite a bit of prep you have to do prior to the trip in order to get access. So it was neat for them to experience that. The Gettysburg experience, I'm told, was pretty amazing. They stopped along the way on the first day in down at Gettysburg, and I know that the tour guide they had for that was particularly really great. He showed them, really focused on the New Hampshire regiments that were part of the Battle of Gettysburg, and the kids were pretty engaged with it. I think we went over to saw Nats, Washington Nationals baseball game yesterday, and they've been off and running on the interior today. So things are going pretty well. Good stuff. The halftime school counselor, just sort of a update that we received 6 applications for the halftime position. We were looking to interview at least 3 or 4. We ended up interviewing 2 people who, and both applicants were great. We do plan on bringing a candidate forward we think will be a great match for the role. So that's a good piece. Quick note on professional development for summer and going into 2018-2019. I did a survey for staff and faculty on just for some feedback on points or places we might focus on for professional development. So math and literacy instruction were really prominent in there. Best practices for working with challenging student behavior, which is something we focused on a little bit this year through restorative discipline and some other pieces we've done around character education. But that was certainly prominent. And then strengthening academic interventions. Those were probably the top 3 of the 6 or 7 topics that were suggested or given in the survey. So it's that feedback is helpful to sort of really think about priorities. There are certain things that we're doing that we're doing. I think competencies is not really, is one of those non-negotiables. That's, we're moving in that direction. We're going to be offering at the end of the year with Dr. Driscoll will be here for 2 days of professional development. One, focusing on that vertical alignment piece that I've been talking about. We're going to have 1 day dedicated to that, and then we're going to have a second day where we begin to work on developing some performance assessments as an entry point into thinking about competencies. We have some competency statements that are embedded in the curriculum documents that we created, but we really want to try to pair that with building a performance assessment, really looking at transfer knowledge. And we're planning on focusing on that piece for our second day at the end of the year. So good things happening there. The academic daily schedule, Ms. Pagarian is down in DC as a chaperone, but she has been really working away at this. Our leadership team met for an hour as a separate meeting. We meet twice a month, but we did a separate meeting for feedback on schedule. I talked about moving the 5th and 6th grade team to really mirroring the 7th and 8th grade model, which is something that we will be doing. And so that's really been the bulk of the work that we've been looking at in terms of the schedule. And we think we can build in some great intervention time, dedicated intervention time for math literacy, with looking at the 5th grade, 5th, 6th grade, 7th, and 8th grade in particular. And as I mentioned before, we're looking at the opportunity to maybe build in some additional unified arts time as well. But we're still working on it. So I'll have more of an update as we move along. But Ms. Pagarian has been really rolling her sleeves up over the April break. She was here for most of those days. If you go into her office, you'll see her whiteboard is one big colorful schedule of trying to move different parts around and think about different kinds of possibilities. So it's been an inclusive process, and we're getting there. We're working on
So with the guidance counselor, that it will be part-time, right?
it. Correct.
Did you figure out the schedule yet?
We haven't figured out this, because I think it's somewhat dependent on the candidate. So I think that's the next part. We have talked, what we have talked about is conceptually, we really would like to look at the halftime counselor along with Mrs. Pagnata's position around roles. Because I feel like if we do that, we'll create better continuity in terms of delivery of service instead of trying to look at grade levels. So we're really focusing on who that person is and the kinds of skills they bring to the table and the kinds of background that they have, and then pairing that with the kinds of roles that the school counselor incorporates. So we're working on that piece.
I just have one other question while you're working on the schedule. Will the kids have math every day?
Yes.
It's important to have math every day.
What is the timeline for the counselor position, bringing that to the board? Are you expecting that at like our next meeting?
Yes. Yeah. We're ready to move forward with it. So
Okay.
we should have that for the next meeting.
Now, what about, they're going to be sharing space? Sharing?
I don't think so. We would thought about, I'm not sure, Carrie, on that piece. We'll have to look at what might be best. That's a possibility, but probably like to allow or give that person a dedicated space as they might be meeting with students, and you have someone sharing the same space who's also meeting with students that can get.
Right.
Yeah.
Have that privacy.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So we'll look at giving a dedicated space. It's a matter of finding where that space will be. So, yeah.
I have another question just about you're having the kindergarten orientation on the 18th.
Yeah.
So do you know how many kids will be there?
Last told, I think we were in the mid-30s. I think that there are, I want to say in the low 40s for people we've reached out to. We haven't received the RSVP back from each kiddo. So if we did, we would probably be more like towards 41, 42 for the screening. But right now, I think we're about 35,
And this
36.
includes the kiddos moving up from step by step? That
Yes.
you know are coming?
Yes, it does, yeah.
Now, how does that work exactly, the orientation? Is it same as the screening?
It has, yeah, there's a screening piece to it, so we look at literacy and numeracy skills. It's a pretty interactive process, so we don't have kids sitting there, taking a test, if you will, on those things. It's really embedded in the activities that the teachers do. They also visit with some of our related service providers to look at, OT, PT, those kinds of different pieces, fundamental awareness, all those things around basically literacy and numeracy. The parents, we do a session with parents, in both the morning and the afternoon, so I come in and do an introduction to the school and give sort of the 35,000-foot view. I talk a little bit about my experience as a parent with a kindergartner way back when, because she's now 14 years old, hard to believe. And then we have both Mrs. Pagnata and Mrs. Homiak. We share a little bit. They kind of do an interactive activity with the parents around what's important to them, what are their hopes and dreams for their kiddos. So it's a neat opportunity for us to introduce the school and ourselves to parents. And while we're doing that, the kiddos are with the classroom teachers working on those basically assessments or screening pieces for literacy and numeracy. They take a picture. I'm going to be a kindergartner picture. We have a little frame they hold over their face. We do that. So it's fun. The kids enjoy it. It's their first opportunity to kind of be in the classroom a little bit, see some of the other kiddos. So it's generally a pretty.
Do they still do like a bus ride? Or?
We do that in the summer.
Okay.
Yeah, before they start, because they have their own day. The kindergarten students, they have their own dedicated day when they come in. But
Okay.
prior to that, we have a Sunday, ice cream Sunday experience for them, and then their first bus ride. Yeah, so it's fun. Want to make one shout out to our PTO, who's done some amazing stuff over the last number of days for teacher appreciation. We've had more carbs and sugars and sweets and food, and I think there was winners of massages today, and all kinds of great stuff that the PTO has helped to sponsor to really show teachers how much we appreciate the work that they do each day with kiddos. So they really have made a great effort this year. Just want to credit them for that.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you mind just briefly explaining this Six model and how you want to have it mirror 7 and 8? Can you talk a little bit about what that is, that model?
So it would, essentially, we would have, currently we have teachers at both 5th and 6th grade who are teaching ELA plus one other content area. So
Okay.
ELA in science, ELA in social studies, ELA in math.
Okay.
Which has been fine, good. But we also, what we want to do is really, one, strengthen where I think teachers are most strong in terms of content by separating ELA out. That's one of the benefits. So we're going to have a dedicated ELA teacher for 5th grade and a dedicated ELA teacher for 6th grade. One of the benefits of that is with the reading and writing work that we've done, we actually create more instructional time for each of those pieces. With the workshop model, that's, I think, a big asset. Then you have dedicated content teachers who are cross grade level. So you have a 5th and 6th grade science teacher, a 5th and 6th grade social studies teacher, a 5th and 6th grade math teacher. And I think that's a strength for us because although the teachers have done a wonderful job with the ELA, I think ultimately having teachers in one content area is a better focus for them, and it puts them in a real area of strength and passion. So that part I think is a benefit.
Are the math classes leveled at the upper grades?
That's been a conversation we've had. They have been leveled at times. This year, at those, we've had at least a couple of sections that were leveled. But ultimately, I think that's something we really have to look at. We're a small school, so it's a little bit different question that might be at a larger school with a broader population in terms of demographics and socioeconomic and so on. But generally, I think we have to look at how
That
we do
question
that.
came to mind when you were talking about meeting the needs of all students.
Right.
The challenge of meeting the differentiation required between students that
Right.
need remediation, the students who require enhancement,
Exactly. Yep.
is so challenging. So I just wondered, in the upper grades, in preparation for Co-Brown, if there was a leveling process in order for the enhancement piece to be
Right.
implemented.
And there has been a leveling process, especially for math instruction. But I think we need to review and look at it because my concern is, and again, it's a little bit different in our little microcosm than it is when you read, I don't say really research because I haven't seen a lot of strong research on this question, but a lot of commentary on it about the impact that has on your learners at lower levels. And so we want to make sure that we're always doing what's best for kids and not necessarily what's easiest for teachers, and I'm not saying that teachers are asking for that, but I think that's part of the question when it comes to whether leveling is a good idea. And so when I think about mixed ability grouping as really your best way to, the best way to arrange classes. You can do homogeneous grouping in the context of your classroom in small groups to better address learning needs, both for those that are below grade level and those that are beyond. Also, I think
agree with you, it's just very hard.
it is. If we can
resources
really
aren't in
do a
place.
better job with tier 2 interventions, then I think that's another part of that differentiating for instruction. But so that's a question that we're sort of engaging, basically.
Thank you.
Well, what we have done in the past, I had one of my kids, we went through this. He was able to move up a grade for math time, but that meant the kids were all having math, 5th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders, they were all having math at the same time. By the time I got to 8th grade, he was on his own doing VLAX, geometry, with no help. So, but don't we still allow kids to move up if they need?
I mean, we certainly could have that conversation, sure. I think that, I don't think we can base a system on that. I mean, like you said, there might be a particular individual student for whom that approach is needed or better. for them. But I think we have to think really clearly about what our priorities. One of the things around leveling is the concern that there's a sort of a social cost to that, particularly for your lower learners in terms of how they identify as a group, can be, and also that part of the caution with leveling is that those that are in the lower level receive a lower level of instruction, so it can sometimes lock them into that pace. The other thing is peer modeling. And for as much as we talk about cooperative learning or cooperative groups, you lack peer models who have higher levels of learning, obviously, if you are leveling. So that's a harder piece to really get at. So it's, again, like I said, it's a conversation that we're having.
Last question, I'm sorry to belabor math.
Yeah.
Is, do students here at Stratford have an opportunity to earn high school level credits before entering Co-Brown in high school? And if so, is that done through a heterogeneous approach? A1, for example, in 8th
Right.
grade.
Yes. So do we have an Algebra 1?
Do you have Algebra 1 offered here in 8th grade that
Correct.
can count for Co-Brown so they can jump right into geometry in Co-Brown, just as an example?
Yes.
And if so, that's happening in a homogeneous or a heterogeneous?
That's in a homogeneous group.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Spanish is heterogeneous, and so they're not getting credit, but they can go into
You're right.
Spanish too.
Yes. Yep.
When
Yep.
they don't
They do or don't get Spanish credit?
They don't
here
get
that
the-
goes to Co-Brown?
They don't get the physical credit on their transcript, but they are allowed to start in Spanish 2 their freshman
Okay.
year.
All of those discussions have been going on for the last 4 or 5 years of looking at specifically algebra, world language, and seeing if there's something we can do to push the acceleration at this level so that it would carry some credits. A lot of times it's, instead of credits, it's waiving that going to the next level like a Spanish 2. One of the other issues with leveling, especially in a small school, is it's very difficult with a small group of students to start with to level a math class and not level the rest of your day. Just
Sure,
schedule,
they would travel
just
together.
schedule wise.
Which is definitely an impact.
So that in
Right.
itself is a
I
challenge.
understand.
And I think that, I think everybody would agree that some form of leveling in math makes sense, especially at the 7th and 8th grade level. But at the same time, are there ways that we can put interventions in place to make sure that we're not leveling and tracking kids throughout their entire day?
I understand.
And that's, so there's, that term tracking sort of carries on a whole, right?
Exactly.
But
that's what it comes down to.
No, you're absolutely right. So the other impact of that can be is that a lot of times, not always, but in general, when you do leveling so you have your lower learners, a lot of times there's a behavioral layer there too that accompanies that. And so now from a classroom management standpoint, you're really looking at if you think about peer modeling works both ways. I can model what's right and I can model what's wrong, and I'm going to learn or be reinforced on each of those depending. So it is a tricky piece, because if you wanted to do some level of, or some piece of leveling for math, for instance, for Algebra 1, can you do that without leveling for the other content areas in the rest of their schedule?
And usually the biggest push in any school at the 8th grade comes with Spanish, or world language going into high school, and algebra. Those are your two biggest pushes.
Well, as a passionate special educator, I live and breathe the remediation world, but I appreciate that we're not losing sight of the enhancement.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of kids who are meeting and exceeding and need to be,
Yeah, we need to do more. We need to do more.
and it's hard,
Yeah.
and I know it's hard.
Do we have any kids doing geometry online?
No. That's my knowledge. I mean, not to my knowledge. If they are, they're doing it.
Any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
Let's move on to the copier.
All right, the copier, I call it the cheat sheet comparison, is on page 22. It shows you all the bids, just a little background. This is for the copier in the 4th grade wing, where the lease is coming to an end. And if we do nothing, the lease will renew for successive 90-day periods until we decide what we're doing with it. So you can see the different bids that we got. The recommendation is for the Seacoast business machines, and that's based on quality and service. And if you have any other questions, I can have Scott speak to that as well.
Is the 192,000 copies a year, have we ever exceeded that machine? Never? So we've never had to go over and get look at what the additional copy would cost us?
I don't think so.
You've been happy with Sequels?
They've done a good job for us. They have. We've recently had a couple repair issues, not with this copier, but with ours, our main one. They've come in, and they've had to come in a couple different times, but they've come in proactively, responsibly, and done a good job servicing those. So yeah, we talked as an office staff last week during our office staff meeting on these, and I think the consensus was Seacoast has done a nice job for us. This particular model certainly suits our needs, and if you look at it from a cost perspective, it's a good value. So,
They would bring in a new machine, right? If you renew this, you keep the same machine.
I'd have to look to see. I don't know if it's a new machine. Yeah, it is. Yeah,
It's a new machine, right?
I believe it is. It says the new MX M5070. So I believe it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And keeping the old one and having it come in and share it.
Right. Yeah.
We need up the funds on that question. Chair would entertain a motion if people are comfortable with the bids.
Motion to accept the bid from Seacoast Business Machines for total is $10,598.40. And that's for a 4-year period?
48 months, yeah.
4-year period.
Second.
Have we ever looked at a shorter period when we put out bids? Some of these machines age pretty quickly.
Typically, we've gone for 4 years. You can see the maintenance and everything put into it, but that's pretty typical for 4 years.
I see Canon at the end first. 5-year one. Everybody else is 4
The
years.
same machine that they were proposing for 4 years.
Right, right.
Save $10 a month.
They go a little bit less if you keep it for another year. We probably use the maintenance cost.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion, did someone second?
I do.
Any further discussion? All those in favor going Coast Business for 4-year copy of plan for the 4th grade wing, is that correct? Say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you. On page 27, you've got the personnel report, short and sweet. It's one stipend for Eddie Jacobs, Special Olympics coaching, and you can see that that's 1 hour 3 times a week, and plus they have some weekend needs attached to that as well.
And where does that money come from? Is that a grant or is that money?
I'm trying to remember where that CD came from. I think it's.
You're positive it's what?
I'm gonna look. I'm almost positive it's free.
It's on the CBA.
I should have included it. I think we've done it on a REIT if I remember it in the past.
Yes. It's free. Yep.
Motion to accept the personnel report dated May 9th, 2018 for Abby Jacobs as a Special Olympics coach. $700 stipend, $1 hour a week for what is this, 1 hour a week, 2 times a week, and weekend meets. And this will be funded from our REAP grant.
Second, last.
Anyone second that? Sorry.
It's okay, don't be sorry.
Any further discussion? And how long does that go? Is that for a year, or is that for
No, it's
the
for
rest
the-
of the year? Or is that
This is for the next couple months. Yeah,
until the end of the year?
yeah. They have a big meet over at UNH, the track football program.
How many kids are involved?
We have 5.
Was this a role Ms. Rondon had with that?
Yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? Doctor?
Okay, the next is the update on the collective bargaining agreement. My understanding is you had a few questions at the last meeting. So we've done some follow-up on the CBA. Hopefully I can answer a few of the questions. In trying to relate the fact-finding report back to the contract, we have gone through that, and that's what you saw and reviewed at the last meeting and prior to the last meeting. And then we did some double checking after the last meeting, because I guess there was some question about being retroactive. The fact-finding report doesn't speak to that. The fact-finding report says that the only piece that they speak to starting, it's a 3-year contract, where the only piece that they spoke to was the salaries starting July 1st of 2017 with no increase. So that's the only piece that was spoken to, is reflected in the contract. Everything else starts July 1st of 2018. So we knew the questions. We went back and asked our insurance carrier if it was even possible to go retroactive on changing the insurance, and I sent that information to you, the insurance company, saying that they could not go retroactively, and any changes will need to be July 1st, 2018, which is what we had originally planned on. The other question that was relayed to me was specific to the paraprofessionals and snow days, early release, and delayed openings. You can see the legal feedback that I handed out on that, and the attorney does not recommend that we go back and try to do that retroactively. And the way the wording is that you negotiated actually has it kind of open-ended, in that technically they could do the professional development now and still have that acceptable, because there's no time frame on that. So that's not supported by the attorney to do that retroactively at all either. So I've also sent you the collective bargaining agreement with adjustments. We went back through it again to make sure that there are no edits that need to be made. We did find a couple of things, and I'll highlight those for you. If you look through on page 7 of the contract, it was just it says accumulated, and it should be cumulative. So we changed that slight wording. On page 8, to start that paragraph, it says sick bank account for professional employees, and then it said sick bank for paraprofessionals. It should be sick bank account for paraprofessionals. So we added that word in to be consistent. On page 11, you see the word employees shall stay, and it says approximately 30 minutes after the school closes. That approximately should have been taken out. So we crossed that approximately out to be consistent with what the, I believe that was a tentative agreement that had been agreed upon. Let me see what else I have here. And then on page 16, just to add clarity for everybody as to what starts and what doesn't start at what particular time, we added a sentence that says there will be no salary adjustments for the 17-18 school year. All other changes will begin implementation on July 1st, 2018, just to add clarity so there's no confusion or questions. So these are the reviews that we've done, and try to answer any questions that came up at the last meeting. I met with the teachers union and went over these changes, and they agreed that they should be made. So I bring it back to you for reconsideration at this point, and if there are no changes, I have a clean copy with those changes made for you, and it's up to you to discuss.
Well, we're looking at the wordage that past chair was our negotiator. And when he left, we didn't get all the information that he had, and he came in at the last meeting and discussed the sick leave policy that continues to have a missing word after 7. Did we take care of that?
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Where are you?
On the sick leave, the other item I was frustrated due to the fact that it was a joke for 4 years, as Mr. Monahan said, was the sick leave policy that continues to have a missing word saying after 7.
After 7, where are we?
You didn't give a page number. Page 7 talks about sick leave, and it continues to page 8.
Right. And I looked at that.
I couldn't find a 7.
Right.
See, 10, 15, 50.
Is there a line N that sticks out in my head?
Line 10.
Yeah.
I'm not finding. I'm not finding.
Sick leave policy, so it has to be within the sick leave policy.
You know, I just want to make a comment.
Go ahead.
None of us that are currently on the board have been on this committee, negotiating committee, for, I was on 4 years ago. The only person, and Bob is probably the only person other than Brian, who sat through all those meetings. So it's a little concerning that, you know, missing a word when we read through this, but not having had the advantage of spending hundreds and hundreds of hours on the committee, just memorizing every word. You know, I just don't feel that was, I'm not happy to be accused of not doing our job.
I agree. So I don't see that, I've just read it twice under the vote.
And I looked before for a 7. I thought I was
Yeah.
missing. I was hoping somebody else would find it.
That is Mr. Monahan's.
All right, okay. Did you look at the minutes, Bob, to go across
I-
everything that was mentioned in the
I went
minutes?
over with Mr. Rooney and tried to get everything that was addressed throughout the last meeting, and we did our best in trying to find those. Like I said, we did find a couple of small edits, but we couldn't find.
I recall the greatest concern being the financial concern
Yes.
about the retroactive fees.
Yes.
So with the sentence that, I'm assuming the SEA agreed to that sentence, Bob, that you added at the end of the
We had-
contract?
She just went to get the old contract.
We had gone through that, and that's, we discussed putting in a clarifying sentence in
Okay.
there. And I did send this out, when I sent it to the school board members, I also sent it to the SEA.
Okay.
And as far as I know, they were agreeable to everything in yellow, everything
Okay,
highlighted.
and just to read this into the minutes, this would be on page 16 of the contract. It's Article 16, Duration, the parties agree to 1 3-year agreement commencing July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2020. There will be no salary adjustments for the 2017-18 school year. All other changes will begin implementation on July 1st, 2018. So when we see the phrase or the sentence, all other changes will begin implementation on July 1st, 2018, we are saying that that covers the retroactive insurance as well as the paraprofessional issue?
Yes,
That's in here.
that's what I'm
And
saying.
that, did the attorney look at that sentence to know if that's what that meant? I mean,
This hasn't been sent to the attorney now.
I think it needs to be sent to the attorney.
Yeah, I think it needs to
Yeah.
go to the attorney before you sign it, yeah, absolutely. You want to make sure that,
Yeah.
Certainly do that.
yeah, that's what we're paying
Yeah.
for. You want to make sure that he reads it,
Yeah.
gets it back, and we sign it the next one.
I think Audrey
Can
found
I
it.
help you
Audrey's
find
got
where it
something.
is?
Yeah, go ahead, Audrey.
Okay, it's
Did
on
you have
page
negotiated?
15,
Okay.
the,
What's that?
page 15,
Okay.
N, number 1, after 7, and you have the number 7 in parentheses,
Okay.
it's supposed to be years of service.
Okay.
Okay, so the word.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you.
We can make that change as well.
Yes.
So it wasn't in the
Yes,
sick
you
leave
can.
policy, it was
Right.
In the sick leave.
See if they reimburse.
Sick leave
I get it.
reimbursement.
Got it, got it,
7 years of service.
got it.
Can certainly make that
7
change
years.
as well.
All right.
So if that's agreeable, I'll make those changes. I will send them to our attorney and barring any, we get the stamp of approval, is that acceptable? Or-
Do we have, the list of TAs? I'm sorry, are you gonna ask a question?
No, I was waiting for you.
A list of TAs to make sure that every single thing that we TA'd, every single TA item has been changed. So we can actually have a checklist to see it, maybe highlight it.
I've got all of those right here checked off. You're more than welcome to take this entire folder if you'd like.
Well, what do you think? I think,
Is that the TAs and the
OT
fact
is
finder?
good.
Yep.
Yeah, they get you.
You wanna be the
I
checker?
printed out.
no, I don't want that responsibility. No.
I'd like the attorney to check them.
I want the attorney to check it. Let's pay the people we pay to check things. Okay, there we go.
If the board would like us to do that, we'll send them the
Yes.
TAs, we'll send
Yes.
them the fact finder, we'll send them the
Yes.
new contract, the old contract, and they can go down through. That's exactly what we've done. We've gone point by point, checked it many times, and we'd be happy to do that.
Please put this paragraph in it so you can check all that to make sure it's in the right place.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Consider
All
Is
right.
that the meeting minutes?
So we'll have a new one to sign when the attorney, I'm looking at Audrey because she's part of the negotiating team.
Yeah, Audrey was very nice to sit down and go through it literally item by item and make sure that we had everything.
Thank you. Audrey, thank you too. All right, what else do you have for us, Doctor?
Infrastructure fund, just a quick update, we're still on the wait list. The rumor has it that two things are in your favor.
Okay.
One being, they're not funding all of some of the proposals that they funded didn't get passed in the annual meetings. So those are going to be taken off the list of approval. So
Pushes us up.
that pushes you up. And they're also talking about adding additional funds to fund any of them on the wait list. So it looks good, but we don't have final approval yet. So as soon as we hear, we'll let you know.
Do you have any idea when that would be?
You know,
That's
Debbie,
good.
they keep saying it's next week, so
Okay.
I've heard that a few times, so.
We discussed at our last meeting that some of the items, which we're not going to discuss in public, we would like to know if they're going to be funded, because if not, we have to figure out what we're
Yeah.
doing to our services.
Yep. With every meeting, we'll do an update, so, you know, I know time is of the essence.
Is there any, if we went ahead and did some of this stuff, would we get reimbursed with that?
I wouldn't do it that way.
Yeah, not if it doesn't get final approval, you get nothing.
Okay, all right,
We have a little time.
all right, good.
Yeah, we still, June, Thomas.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was gonna say July first, but
Well,
We have
no,
to
they
make
have
it-
shovels
we
in
have
the
to-
ground,
we have to-
right?
We're going to approve it at our meeting.
We encumber before the final, so we have to ask to hold that money that's left in this year's budget, have to spend for anything that we may want to do that the state may not fund for us.
Did we have bids on those items? I wonder if we could be proactive and get the bids.
That's a great idea, yeah.
So the items that we put in for the grant,
Yep.
could we put those items out to bid, anticipated work, which we will either be funded one way or the
I
other?
think we certainly can do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll get with Gary, get the list. And if, is it, what type, is it, if it's under $10,000, we don't have to get RFP, is that, what's it?
Did we change it to 5?
I think it's right.
I think ours is 5, the SAU I think is 10, we're 5. I think.
We're five.
Yeah.
Because I know like the cameras and the doors will be separate.
But we're not talking about what it is in public.
Okay, I'm sorry, but anyway. Whatever.
Security infrastructure goes
Hypothetically.
into non-public
Yeah.
session.
All right, sorry.
That's fine.
I think that's a great idea.
Yep, we can get that started.
Great. All right. Anything else, Dr. Regino? Okay, correspondence presentations. Does anybody have any correspondence? Barbara? Dr. Young? Good. Board members, no?
Well, I was contacted by a community member just suggesting that the school board page only be like the agenda, the minutes, and the taping,
Oh.
treats.
Oh, because I
Just
put the thing
passing
about
on.
the
I can't
children with
remember what it was,
the people with
but-
autism.
I can't remember what it
Oh,
was,
it
it
was
was
the
just, it was just.
It was because of the autism program. I was promoting.
Well, I think we need to decide one way or the other.
No,
If
you're right,
we're
you're right.
only
We will-
doing
We will not
business.
put that one, yes.
Anybody else for correspondence? Good. Okay, Stratford Community News Calendar. Nice job on the first one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. We normally put the graduates for, we do a co-brown for probably the next one.
The full list?
The Stratford kids.
Yep.
And then the following calendar, we do the Stratford kids.
So should I reach out to Christie or Bob, or do you have that, or?
Christie
The
will
list
have
would
it.
be for
Yeah, I don't have it, so I can get it for you if you'd like.
Oh, she and I should start.
She's really good.
I'll dismiss my kid, dismiss my kids and stuff, so she knows me by now.
All right, who has any committee updates? Deb?
No, we haven't had
Really?
it the last 2 years. It's been wonderful.
We've had time off. All right, we have a huge amount of set future meeting dates.
Can we get into the minutes that
Yeah.
Misty and I did the new school board orientation last week?
Oh, yeah, that's perfect. That's the time to do it, yeah.
Yeah, and I did the Student Voice Initiative workshop last Tuesday, which was great, and I think something that going forward, would like us to talk more about. I know Dr. Young is arranged a student council here next month, their next meeting, and stuff, but I think it's an area we can explore and push is student voice, both for the board, but supporting the school in student voice. So the things that came up that had surprised me was Genius Hour and ELO's, Extended Learning Opportunities, falling under the category of student voice in their learning, and there's some really great work out there about how that improves whole school culture and the trickle-up effect of that, being college and career ready. So it's just something I would like us to keep in mind.
I'd love to expand that also to Co-Brown. I know the Nottingham board has a Co-Brown student.
Right.
Share some of the things that are happening at Co-Brown. So I would love to have a Co-Brown student. I don't know how frequently the board discuss that, but whether it's quarterly or something like that, to share the things happening at our Stratford schools, at the high school.
Dover has a regular rep, yeah.
Worcester River is a regular rep too. I don't know if we want to explore that, but at least to have someone that.
So one small thing around to that I would like to put out there for us, and not that we would have to decide on it tonight, but to maybe think about is the possibility of putting a suggestion box so kids can communicate with us. You know, and maybe some of it gets sifted back to student council. You know, it might not all be appropriate, but just so kids feel that they have access to some decision makers, I think it would be a good message.
Okay, are you ready for the dates now?
Sorry.
There's a lot of them. May 16th and 21st, the joint board meetings, one in Co-Brown. Meeting with Co-Brown, first one, the second one is regular joint board at the SAU. Then, May 22nd is CBNA baccalaureate. Is anybody going to that? Good for you. Good. Then our regular board meeting is May 23rd, that's 2 weeks from today. And CBNA graduation will be on the 25th. You're going to that if you're going to baccalaureate. June 13th is regular school board meeting, and June 27th would be a regular school board meeting, but we have Stratford graduation between that and June 20th and June 25th is the joint board at the SAU. I went to the graduation, I was the only member at graduation last year. Yeah, it'd be nice to have.
Here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have the members of.
it's on my calendar.
It's nice. It's nice to, the parents are very proud of the children. It's perfect for board members to be there, so.
It's great, it's on my calendar as well.
Good, good. I didn't participate and sit up the front like Dr. Young wanted me to, but it wasn't, it's not the board's night, it's the kids' night, so I stayed in the back. Anything other from the board members?
Could we, I know Nottingham's doing on the 16th. Could we have a regular board meeting on the 16th? After that Co-Brown meeting was very fast, it's very short. Nottingham's doing, I don't know, can we do it the same building, same night?
What do you want, to take the place of the 23rd? Is
Yeah,
that what you-
plus on the
think that would be a
23rd, you
great
have to
idea.
do it on the
We
16th.
could, we've done that in the past.
We
We would
split
like
up.
to shoot-
He's not jazzed about it.
Well, we
You
can
can do it if you'd like.
We have two superintendents.
We would have to split them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're only gonna get one of us, but you
That's
certainly
fine.
can do that.
Flip a coin.
Good, that would be
So there's
perfect.
plenty of space,
That way-
that's something to consider.
They
No,
have-
space is fine.
They have
It-
classrooms, we just.
Headmaster will get us a room
Okay.
if you wanna do that.
That goes fast.
I have no problem moving the regular meeting to the 16th after the joint, after the Co-Brown meeting at Co-Brown, and then canceling the 23rd meeting.
That's graduation week.
Yeah, it's graduating, it's gonna be a busy
That's
week.
really- It's gonna be so busy.
It's gonna be a
That's
busy week.
perfect.
Okay, let's do that. Is there any board member not want to do that? Good.
Okay, so
Amelia, you get that, Amelia?
I do, but I wouldn't even get the address and then what room we're at. This is the last
Yeah.
number.
Dr. Yomsky will get you this one.
yes, so just to be clear, so we're on the May 23 meeting is canceled.
Correct.
And the May 16 meeting is gonna be at 7 PM
Yes,
at Co-Brown.
yes,
And I'll find out what room we're gonna be in.
got it.
Because I know Nottingham's doing it also,
Yes.
same night.
Yep.
We've done it before.
Yeah.
You've done it before, whoever was on that meeting night,
Right.
you've done it before.
That's
so
perfect, so good.
We certainly can do that.
Do we think we'll get the turnaround from the attorney around the CBA? Because we just said we'll sign it at the next meeting.
Probably.
But that's next week, so,
I'll get it to him tomorrow and,
okay.
no, we did it in a hurry.
No, don't hurry.
We want to have it before the 16th, though. Okay, that's good, because there are many meetings scheduled. Anything else other from the board? If not, we'll open up the public comments at this time, so, public, Zach? Yes, Audrey, go
Hi,
ahead.
Audrey Dolan. I just wanted to make a comment on the discussion I was hearing about grouping for math. You
Yep.
know, we do at the 6th grade level have one somewhat accelerated math group and two regular math groups that are very heterogeneous. And the children then get redistributed for social studies and for science.
So they're not traveling.
They are not traveling together.
Okay, great.
It's an interesting scheduling thing, and I can't tell you I understand all of it, but Alan does it, and it worked just fine. Every child has their own schedule, so they know what rotation block they're going to, but they're not in the same grouping all day long. I just wanted to let you know
Are
that
the
it's
class
doable.
sizes comparable?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome, thanks.
Thank you, Audrey. Anybody else?
I just have a question with
Sure.
regard to the incoming kindergarten class. How does that work? I know when a few years ago, remember the debacle of hiring a teacher last minute, where we're kind of on that cusp. Is there a process if there needs to be a third kindergarten teacher? Dr. Young? I'm addressing you.
Well,
He's
I'm pointing
answering.
on the I'd like him to discuss the numbers situation, so, how do you feel about that?
I don't think there's a way to, there's not a process, in part because you don't know what you got until you get it.
Yeah.
So I think there's conversation about anticipating numbers, which we can do in the sense that we've seen, you know, well, I think we're at, maybe it was 20 or around there at each level or each grade, each class for kindergarten. Now we're at 22 each. Our numbers in terms of the screening, as I said, would probably predict that we're going to be pretty close to that.
Yeah.
Because those, you know, you're at mid-30s with invitations for 40-something, 41, 42. So, I mean, obviously, theoretically, if you got everyone coming, that's that would be of age, then you would be right around the same number. So,
And then whatever happens over the summer, there always seems to be a good handful that.
right. So we have some flexibility. We do have a teaching position we're looking to hire. It's going to be at the primary level. Right now, we're talking specifically about first grade.
Yep.
And we're having conversations about anticipating the possibility that we're going to see similar numbers at kindergarten. I would say that, having talked with both Mrs. Jacobs and Mrs. Irons, there are real challenges around having 21, 22 5-year-olds for a full day. And so, at the same time, they should not sell themselves short, not that they're trying to, but they've done amazing work.
Yeah.
So, we can do the work.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really is about taking what we have, what we can supply in terms of staffing. We have an open teaching position that we're looking at for the primary level. As I said, the focus has really been on first grade because that's more of the known at this point.
Yeah.
You know, there are other possibilities. Do you do sort of a multi-age approach? And so you span that a little bit,
Yeah.
where you are able to accommodate some kindergarten numbers with some first grade numbers. That's a
Yeah.
very, very conceptual. That might be something for us to consider depending on how the numbers shake out. So, I don't think there's a straightforward answer to that question.
I guess I just want to make sure, I mean, I know it's on the radar, but I just remember what happened that I can imagine the kindergartners coming in and having to then be split up into another class. You know, if we didn't have it already, I don't know, get already on our radar, I guess.
I really feel confident that with what we have for what we have budgeted for current staffing is going to be adequate.
Yeah.
And I think that's my focus, and that's sort of been the conversations we've had. There's always the exceptional, a situation where you receive in kindergarten numbers that you just didn't even anticipate or think. And then I think that might be a game changer. That might create a different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can do a great job with both kindergarten for the incoming as well as for first grade with what we have for current staff.
I have a follow-up there. Have you posted yet for that position?
I don't know. I don't know if it's up. I've asked for the posting. So yeah.
So most people, having taught first grade, most people who have taught first grade are very capable of teaching kindergarten.
Are you thinking about that part?
There you
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yep. Yep. I agree.
I appreciate the concern, because that happened a few years ago in second grade. They started the year and then they had to
Exactly.
hire and you had to reshuffle. It's disruptive,
Mm-hmm.
so.
I can imagine kindergarten, that would be.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, who's next? Anybody else?
Eric Almanzon, I just wanted to say that with all due respect, I think the board should have pulled those contracts, the fact finders report, and compared it and gone through line by line. Those issues that were brought forth by Brian and also discovered by Jim were there to see, plain as day. So I understand that the previous chair was on the negotiating committee for 4 years, but there's a lot of money and there's a lot of faith in the school board for what you guys do. So I think it is under your umbrella of responsibility to know exactly what was in that contract. That's all.
Jim Russo?
Yep.
Scott, real quick question for you. You mentioned earlier in the principal report that you're looking at summer curriculum and professional development. Roughly, how many educators are looking at taking advantage of that? And what are the costs, where are those costs coming from? What bucket do they come out of? If there's any, I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of last year, because we're kind of have a better menu of options for staff to choose from. I think as we come closer to the end of this month, we're sort of formulating a few different possibilities for professional development into the summer and then leading into the school year. During the school year, it's a lot of it. The whole instructional staff is involved in it because most of what we're doing is instruction, across the staff. So last year we probably had about 20 different teachers that were somewhat involved in offering summer professional development. So we had a restorative discipline group, sort of PLC group they had together. We had a competency group that also was a part of some professional development during the summer. In the past, we've done work on power standards in terms of basically curriculum work. We've had teachers involved in science, looking at our science curriculum and doing work in that on that during the summer. So essentially, we have a funding source specifically for summer curriculum development and revision in the budget. So there's $4,000 specifically for summer curriculum work. And then we also have Title II-A monies. So we're going to spend out the Title II-A monies, which is a good thing. They're grant monies and they're there to spend through 2018. And now we're looking at earmarking monies with the next iteration of Title II-A, which is specifically for professional development.
So you're figuring possibly maybe right around 20 teachers or so?
I'm just going on what we've seen in the past, at least in terms of summer, participation. And ultimately, usually what happens from those groups is that they then become a part of presenting and carrying forward to colleagues and the rest of the staff the work that we've done during the summer. So there's usually some ripple effect with that as well.
Oh, thanks. Debbie, to your comment earlier, and a little bit to Eric's comment, you're right. You know what? You weren't part of the negotiating team. You're right. Yeah, you weren't. And so I can understand your frustration there, and I get that. But here's the bottom line. This board was gone through and pushed, was pushed by an SEA to go and have a contract signed. And everybody was all excited about the day it went through and got signed, and it was wrong. Wrong to the point where we should be getting back as taxpayers about approximately $20,000 in healthcare reimbursements, where we should be going through and getting other monies back. Now, at the end of the day, it's going to end up being no harm, no foul, right? You're going to end up changing the contract, everybody's going to sign it, it's going to have the proper language in it, but it doesn't change the fact that the contract got signed essentially in a rush, where there was, Misty, all due respects, you sat there and screamed at Chairman Monahan the very next day, right after you got elected in. You hadn't even sat on the board yet.
I'd like to clarify for the minutes, I was a member of the public. I
Fair
was
enough.
not sworn in.
You're right.
And as a member of the public, just like you, Jim, I have an opportunity to voice my opinion.
Absolutely.
I was not on the board.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough. Okay? So the point being is that it was getting pushed. Who's been responsible for going over the contract after the concerns were brought up 2 weeks ago, Mr. Godomsky?
Is this public comments or public
This is
discussion?
public questioning, it sounds like.
I'm just asking the question.
I'm just asking the chair whether this is public comments or whether.
We just want comments, please, thank you.
Fair enough. Mr. Patrick, I'm going to
Yes, sir.
really suggest to you that you read every word of that contract because, sir, it's going to be your signature representing the town
I agree.
as you go through and you sign that. And I would make the suggestion that it's not the responsibility of the superintendent nor of the attorney. It's the responsibility of the person putting their signature on the page. Because Mrs. Duffy is here, I would suggest the same thing. If Mr. Gomwood here, I would say the same thing. Because it was those signatures, those are the responsible parties.
I agree.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We do have a non-public issue. Dr. Gomes, what do we have?
Under A and C, I have a parent request and a personnel issue.
Chair would entertain a motion to go into non-public.
I move that we go into non-public under A and C, parental concern and personnel issue.
Second.
We'll do roll call, yes, we will. Okay, during non-public session, no votes were taken, discussion on student placement.
As a follow-up, I'd like to make a motion. The board would like to grant a parent request received for a student to remain at Stratford School throughout the entirety of this current school year, and the family will be responsible for the transportation.
Second.
Any further discussion on that? And just to clarify, Dr. Young, you feel this is in the best interest of the student?
Absolutely.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Anything else for public session?
We're gonna post the new meeting date.
Yep. There still has to be one more motion.
I'll move
I'll
to
move to
adjourn.
Who seconded that?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Audrey.
Now I get to them.
Audrey,
Yes?
one more question about the,
Did you guys close up?
no, we're all done.
I'll edit.